Welcome to the deep dive. We hear that word innovation tossed around constantly these days.
We really do.
It's definitely more than just a buzzword, though, isn't it? I mean, it feels like the
Yeah.
actual lifeblood of success, especially now. Things move so fast.
It absolutely is. And yet, here's something that always gets me. How often managers, people in organizations they overlook or sometimes flat out ignore really valuable, potentially game-changing ideas.
Yeah,
And these ideas aren't coming from some, high-paid external consultant. They're right there from their own people, their employees.
right. It feels like such a huge missed opportunity. You're talking about a company's most potent resource.
Mm-hmm.
The collective smarts, the creativity of the entire workforce just sitting there, untapped.
And basically gold mines, potential growth, improvement, just waiting.
Exactly. Gold mines.
And what's fascinating and honestly kind of frustrating is that the very things put in place to make operations run smoothly,
Yeah.
the structures, the culture, they can actually become these invisible walls.
Oh, okay. Invisible walls.
Yeah, they block that flow of brilliant ideas coming up from the ground floor, keeps those valuable insights right under the manager's noses, but somehow totally out of sight.
So, okay, our mission then for this deep dive is to really pull back the curtain on these invisible walls. Let's try and unpack how they get built, what they look like, in the real world, and maybe most importantly, how we can start to break them down. So where do we start? What's the first wall? Maybe the most obvious one.
Yeah, let's start with maybe the most obvious, but often the toughest one, the hierarchical wall.
Okay. Hierarchy.
Think of it like a fortress, you
Yeah.
know? In so many organizations, that's where ideas end up trapped, right at the bottom. They just can't scale those steep walls of the traditional top-down structure.
Right.
There's this sort of unspoken rule floating around. Innovation, the real innovation, comes from the top brass. Everyone else, they're just there to execute the plan.
That fortress image is really strong. Again, paints a clear picture. Can you give us maybe a concrete example? What does that look like when a genuinely good idea just slams into that hierarchical ceiling?
Oh, absolutely. Picture this. A mid-size tech company, you've got a junior developer pretty low on the totem pole, comes up with a feature suggestion, and it's actually game-changing, could really set their product apart.
Okay.
But it gets dismissed, not because the idea itself is bad, not at all. It's dismissed solely because it didn't come from the official product team or, someone in senior management.
Wow. So the source matters more than the substance, even if it's potentially transformative.
Pretty much. And that really reinforces this dangerous idea that management somehow has a monopoly on innovation.
Yeah, that's got to be demoralizing. Potential breakthroughs just get silenced before they even have a chance.
Precisely. And, often these hierarchical issues are made worse by just a lack of clear pathways for ideas anyway, which kind of brings us neatly to the next wall, the communication wall.
Communication or lack thereof.
Exactly. In so many companies, good ideas just get lost in translation. Or worse, they never even get voiced because there just aren't effective ways to share them, no real channels.
It feels like sometimes companies over-engineer their processes, right? To the point where any kind of, spontaneity or a quick idea just gets completely suffocated.
Totally suffocated. You see things like formal suggestion boxes that feel like, black holes where ideas go to die.
Right. You never hear back.
Or, those quarterly review meetings where maybe you could mention something, but it gets buried under everything else. Rigid reporting lines instead of just a dynamic exchange of ideas. It's an energy killer.
It really is.
And the impact is huge. It's not just about whether an idea gets seen. This lack of good communication it often just kills the desire to innovate in the first place. Employees look at these hurdles, these bureaucratic hoops, and they might just choose silence. It feels like such an uphill battle, this arduous journey to push an idea upstream. Why even bother if it's going to be that hard?
That makes total sense. And these communication breakdowns, they're probably not just isolated problems, right? They're likely tied into the whole company atmosphere.
Oh, exactly. Which leads us to maybe the most insidious barrier, the cultural wall.
Okay.
Yeah, we often talk about corporate culture as this great unifying thing, right? Brings everyone together. But it can also be this incredibly subtle, almost invisible barrier, particularly in cultures that are really risk averse, the ones that prioritize stability above all else, maybe over creativity.
Where new ideas feel like threats rather than opportunities.
Exactly, threats to the status quo. And this is where you often bump into that infamous not invented here syndrome.
Ah, yes. NIH.
Right. Ideas that come from outside a specific group or maybe a different department, they just get shot down instinctively, sometimes without even getting a fair look. It's a really powerful cultural block.
That not invented here thing, it's so ingrained sometimes. But let me ask you this. Are there times when, protecting legacy and tradition is actually important? How do leaders tell the difference without just shutting down every new idea?
That's a really critical question. It's all about discernment, isn't it? You
Yeah.
might have a company that prides itself on its history, its legacy, and tradition,
Right.
and because of that, they might unconsciously resist ideas that challenge how things have always been done, even if those ideas are exactly what they need to adapt and thrive, especially in a changing market.
So it's about knowing what's core value versus what's just old habit.
Precisely. When the culture makes conformity feel safer than suggesting something new, well, creative problem solving just starts to erode away.
Yeah, that's a slow killer for innovation. Yeah. And sometimes, even if the culture isn't actively hostile to new ideas, there's another really practical barrier, isn't there? The time and resources wall.
Oh, absolutely. The sheer pace of modern business, time is just such a scarce commodity, especially for managers trying to juggle a million things.
They're totally overwhelmed.
Right. They often just don't have the bandwidth, the mental space to really give serious thought to a new idea that pops up.
And then you add budget constraints on top of that.
Exactly. Suddenly, considering a new idea feels like a luxury they can't afford. And here's the real paradox. Managers are often desperate for innovative solutions to their problems, but they lack the actual time or the resources to nurture those potential solutions because there's so much pressure for immediate short-term results. Hit this quarter's numbers.
It's a really vicious cycle. You end up overlooking potentially game-changing ideas, and it sends a pretty discouraging message back to employees, doesn't it? Like, yeah, your creativity is nice, but
But we don't really have time for it.
exactly. And speaking of value, that brings up the recognition wall.
Ah, a recognition, or the lack of it.
Precisely. In a lot of workplaces, there's just no real incentive for managers to actually champion or implement ideas from their employees. Think about traditional performance metrics.
Yeah. They rarely factor in whether a manager is good at fostering innovation within their team. It's usually about their direct output.
So if a manager's bonus or their next promotion is tied purely to their own immediate results, taking a gamble on someone else's idea might seem like, well, not much upside for them personally.
Exactly. And what about that whole credit-taking issue you sometimes hear about?
Oh yeah, that's a big one. When managers basically steal the credit for ideas that actually came from their team members.
That is hugely corrosive. It breeds so much cynicism, so much reluctance. Why would you, as an employee, share your best thinking if you suspect your boss is just going to take the credit if it works out?
You just wouldn't. You'd keep it to yourself.
Right. And the impact is obvious. It stifles the flow of ideas, it destroys trust, makes collaboration way harder. It just creates this downward spiral where fewer ideas get shared and even fewer actually get implemented.
Okay, so we've covered hierarchy, communication, culture, time, recognition. What about bias? That feels like another invisible barrier. The bias wall.
Definitely. Unconscious biases can create these really subtle but very significant roadblocks.
How so?
Well, ideas coming from certain departments may be perceived as less important or from employees lower down the hierarchy. They often face this sort of unwarranted skepticism. It doesn't matter how good the idea actually is.
Right. Like maybe a brilliant marketing suggestion comes from someone in IT.
Exactly. That IT professional might have a fantastic insight, but the idea gets dismissed out of hand simply because, what do they know about marketing? There's that perceived lack of domain expertise.
Even if the idea is objectively great.
Even then. And it goes deeper too, doesn't it? Things like groupthink, confirmation bias.
Yeah.
Managers might subconsciously favor ideas that just confirm what they already believe or what fits the group's established thinking. This can blind them to suggestions that are genuinely groundbreaking, but maybe a bit unconventional.
So the impact there is huge, too. It limits the whole pool of ideas you're drawing from. It reinforces those existing power structures. And it just stifles that diversity of thought that you absolutely need for real innovation.
Completely. Essential for true innovation.
Another big one that comes to mind for me is the empowerment wall. You hear so many companies talk about employee empowerment.
Oh, yeah. It's a popular buzzword.
Right.
Yeah.
But then you look at the reality, and there's often this huge disconnect. Companies say they want initiative, they want people to take ownership, but the actual power to make decisions, to allocate resources, even just to try something new, It often stays very tightly controlled, very centralized at the top.
And that's incredibly frustrating for employees, isn't it? They're encouraged to think outside the box, be creative,
Yeah.
but then they find they have absolutely no authority to actually implement their ideas or even just run a small test. It creates this real sense of futility. Like, okay, I had this idea, but I can't do anything with it, so what's the point of even sharing it?
And that just leads straight to a disengaged workforce, doesn't it? People who are just focused on doing what they're told, on compliance rather than thinking creatively.
Check the boxes, don't rock the boat.
Exactly. And speaking of compliance and process, that makes me think of the bureaucracy wall.
Ah, red tape.
Right, the very systems that were probably designed for efficiency.
Mm-hmm.
You know, with all the sign-offs, the lengthy approval processes, the rigid protocols.
Yeah, the stuff meant to keep things orderly.
Exactly. But they can actually become this dense bureaucratic maze that ideas have to somehow navigate.
It's incredibly daunting, especially if your idea challenges an existing process or maybe cuts across different departmental silos. The sheer energy it takes to push an idea through all those layers, all those approvals, often it just exceeds the enthusiasm for the idea itself.
Their good ideas just die quietly, lost in the system.
So many potential innovations just fade away quietly in that bureaucratic maze. Yep.
Okay, one last wall I want to touch on is what we could call the results-only wall. This is about the culture, specifically how it rewards effort versus outcomes.
Right. A culture that only rewards the final result, the success, and completely ignores the effort, the learning, the process that went into an innovation attempt.
This outcomes over process mentality.
Exactly. And that actively discourages risk-taking, which is, absolutely fundamental to innovation.
Of course. Innovation involves risk by definition.
Right. So if employees know they're going to be judged solely on whether their idea succeeds or fails, black and white, and not on, say, the valuable insights they gained even from a failed experiment,
then they're far less likely to propose something truly novel or ambitious.
Absolutely. It creates this sort of fear-driven environment where playing it safe, sticking to the tried and tested, is clearly the preferable path compared to pushing boundaries and potentially failing.
Wow. Okay, so we've explored, 9 different invisible walls here. Hierarchy, communication, culture, time, recognition, bias, empowerment, bureaucracy, results only. It's quite a list. These barriers are really formidable.
They really are. They weave together in complex ways within organizations.
So after digging into all of that, the really big question is, how do we start breaking them down? It sounds like it can't just be one single fix, right?
No, definitely not. There's no silver bullet here. It really requires a multifaceted approach, a holistic one, that tackles both the structural issues, the hierarchy, the processes, and the cultural elements we talked about.
Structural and cultural.
Yeah. I think the absolute core shift that needs to happen is in perspective. Companies, leaders, managers need to start viewing employee ideas not as, potential threats or annoying distractions, but seeing them for what they are. Vital contributions to the company's evolution, its growth, its long-term success.
That's a really powerful reframe. Okay, so practically speaking then, what are some of the key actions? What really moves the needle in terms of breaking down these walls?
Well, for one, it's about genuinely fostering environments where ideas can actually flow freely, up, down, sideways, across different teams and levels.
How did you do that, though?
It means creating real psychological safety. Safe spaces where people feel they can share an idea, even a half-baked one, without fear of being ridiculed or punished if it doesn't pan out.
Okay, safe spaces. Makes sense.
And implementing transparent feedback mechanisms is huge. So employees actually understand why an idea was maybe accepted, or perhaps why it was rejected. That builds trust, even if the answer is no.
Right, closing the loop. What about recognizing the effort involved? We talked about the results-only trap.
Crucial. You absolutely have to recognize both the effort and the outcomes of innovation attempts. Celebrate the learning, not just the wins.
So maybe that means changing performance metrics.
It could, yeah. Tying a manager's performance evaluation not just to their direct output, but maybe also to how effectively they solicit, champion, and integrate ideas from their team.
That's interesting. Leadership buy-in must be key, too.
Oh, absolutely critical. Leaders have to walk the talk. They need to model openness, show a willingness to challenge the status quo themselves, demonstrate that it's okay to take calculated risks.
Setting the tone from the top. So aligning incentives with innovation sounds like a big piece, too.
Definitely. Make sure the reward systems actually encourage rather than discourage innovative behavior at all levels.
And what else?
Empowering employees, giving them the actual autonomy, maybe some resources, even on a small scale, to act on their ideas. Let them run small experiments, test things out. That can be incredibly motivating.
Giving them some runway.
Exactly. And maybe above all, cultivating a culture that genuinely deeply values diverse perspectives, making sure every voice feels heard, every idea gets a fair chance to be considered no matter where or who it came from.
Breaking down those bias walls we talked about.
Precisely.
Wow. This deep dive has really illuminated just how many of these invisible walls can be silently undermining innovation efforts in our workplaces. It's a lot to think about, isn't it?
It really is. These things are often subtle, but their collective impact can be enormous.
hmm So maybe here's a final thought for you, our listeners, to sort of mull over. Beyond the corporate world we focused on today, think about your own daily life, your work, maybe even personal projects.
Yeah.
What invisible walls might be holding back innovation or progress for you? Could be internal, could be external. And maybe consider how just recognizing those barriers, just seeing them clearly, could be that crucial first step towards breaking them down and unlocking some new potential.
That's a great closing thought. Just awareness itself can be powerful.